Hey everyone, welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, the Friday DFS version. It is now week 14, believe it or not. I am Scott Jenstad, joined as always by Andrew Laird. If you could please rate and review the podcast, that'd be greatly appreciated. It does help people find the podcast, helps us out a great deal. So if you've been enjoying listening to us during the year, leave us a bunch of stars. That'd be very, very nice. Andrew, week 14, how are you?
I'm good. I was telling my wife that we're starting to get to that point of the season where I'm like, it's almost over, but then like with DFS, it's really like through the Super Bowl. So it's not really remotely close to being over. But
the prepping for a 13-game full slate is almost over. Though,
yes, that part
which is what you and I really care
about. It also kind of felt like maybe the Patriots were ready for the season to be over after last night's game. I feel like we're going to see a few of these games that like teams are just look like they're giving up because this part of the season always just feels a little wonky like that. So who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's weird. You get the final core where you get some teams look like that, and then you get some teams who are bad, but all of a sudden throw up like 45 points. The famous Steve Berline, Patrick Jeffers, like final four season, like whatever it was in 1999, I think it was, was just like insane. So you get some runs like that too, and it's fun trying to figure out which of those are going to happen, which teams are going to shut it down, and Cam Newton looks like he's ready to hang out for the summer.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah,
so this slate's fun. This slate is big. We have 13 games on the slate. The bye weeks are done. We don't have any double headers on Monday or no Tuesday or Wednesday games, at least so far. Did have a Thursday game. You mentioned the Patriots Rams last night. Steelers Bills should be a fun game on Sunday nights, also off the slate. And then Ravens Browns, which is weirdly a fun game, weirdly an interesting game, is off the slate. Nobody thought that in August. It's funny that next week the Niners Cowboys got moved off Sunday night for Browns Giants. Like, if you told me that in August, I would have said you are on so many drugs right now. It's crazy. But here we are. This is the NFL is from three months ago. It's much different than we thought it would look like.
Well, I mean, it's like a combination of two things in that one. Like, the Cowboys never get flexed out. Like, never. Yeah. And then to find out they're getting flexed out for the Browns, and you're just like, this is.
And it's not even like the Browns Steelers. It's Browns Giants.
Yes, that's right. Right.
Does not say much about how the Cowboys and 49ers seasons have gone. I guess Andy Dalton and Nick Mullins maybe is not selling many TVs at Christmas.
Yeah, who knew?
Yeah. So we have 13 games, as I mentioned. We have 4 games that look like pretty high totals, 4 games that are low, and then the other games are kind of in the middle. On the high end, we have Green Bay and Detroit takes the cake at 55. Titans Jaguars, fun game from a fantasy perspective, 53. Vikings Bucks 51.5, Colts Raiders 51.5, and we're at the point of the season where we have so many games that it's interesting. I found myself just kind of tossing some games out this week. Never like tossing full slates out or full games out, but you get to a game, you're like, I don't really think with 13 games I want to mess with this. So it's interesting. You got to figure out which games you like, which games in the high 40s, maybe think it bump a little higher, but. With a 13-game slate, I think it's safe to kind of throw a majority of a game out. Like there's always a running back or maybe a cheap receiver you may want from a game. But with so many games, some of these low-scoring games you want to kind of avoid as much as you can.
Yeah, and we've kind of talked a few times over the past few weeks about how there are some games that may have a low total, but it's like a overwhelming spread, and so it's like this game only has a 40-point total, but one team has 29 implied points. Most of the low totals in this slate are fairly close. And so I think, let's see, was that 5 or 6 games that are below 47, and they're all within basically a field goal except for one, which is that which one is that? New Orleans?
Saints Eagles, I think, is 7.5 or 8 on the road. But we got Cowboys Bengals is 43.5. The Niners and the football team is 43.5. Texans Bears is 44.5. So it's a really fun slate. As I was going through it, like I found a lot of plays kind of at every price range. I've been struggling with trying to find running backs I like a lot of the season. There's like 7 I like. There's like a lot of guys I like this week. So it's a tough week because you have to parse down the options. Where a few weeks ago we had 9 or 10 games, and all of a sudden you can kind of there's really some guys you focus in on. But this week it's figuring out how to limit your core players is going to be really valuable this week.
Yeah, I actually unfortunately found myself in a number of situations where I found guys I liked, and I was like, oh man, but maybe I should play this other guy who I definitely do not like, but happens to have a great situation, is a little underpriced. Like, I think there are plays that actually jump out at you, and you're like, I should play that one, but then you find one that you're a little more comfortable with. Whether that's the right move or not is different, but at least you feel a little bit better about it. So I wouldn't be surprised if come Sunday night and, whether you're just below the cash line or what, and you're like, man, if I had just done what I know I should have done instead of what I wanted to do, that's a decision to make.
Oh, the number of times I've had that conversation on Sunday nights.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Last couple weeks have been good, though. I think we've had a lot of good hits on the podcast last couple weeks. So hopefully for a third week in a row. Last week, Corey Davis came up huge for us, a guy that we talked about a bunch, and so it was a high scoring week. But we had some good lineups. So hopefully we keep that train rolling here. Let's jump right into running backs. We've got two guys that are kind of at the top at the elite here. Now that Christian McCaffrey is not going to play this week, you've got Dalvin Cook at Tampa Bay at 9,400, Derrick Henry at Jacksonville at 8,700. Henry sticks out to me this week as easily a play over Dalvin Cook, but Dalvin's a stud. But going against the Tampa run D, I don't think I'm paying up this week for Dalvin.
Yeah, no, I think Dalvin just turns into the perfect GPP pivot from Henry. I mean, it's still a $700 difference. It's not nothing on DraftKings, so it's not totally a 1v1. But Henry, I mean, just explodes off the page, and for every reason possible. We finally were saying. Was that last week? Yeah, last week, we finally found the game script that took Henry out. And it just happened, they were down 100 points at the half. So, I mean, it's basically from the hot Browns who are now Sunday night fodder. But, I mean, they should kill Jacksonville. There's everything works in their favor in the fact that they like to use Henry to get up, and then they like to use Henry to stay up. And so I think the price is obviously high, but he seems like the pretty obvious first place you go for cash games, at least.
Yeah, it's funny we talk about Henry getting game scripted out. He still had 16 touches for 69 yards. That's getting scripted out for Henry. It's crazy. I mean, they were down 38-3 at halftime. I mean, that was an insane. It really takes something that extreme. But I mean, I think that we all think you look at the totals, look at the implied team totals. We all think that Tennessee's going to score a lot of points against Jacksonville. It's just a matter of a lot of people like Ryan Tannehill this week, a lot of people like Derrick Henry, and then you've got both receivers. It's kind of figuring out who's going to end up with a bunch of those points. And usually I'm not a big Henry person, but I love him this week. I mean, it wasn't like we said, it wasn't great against them in week 2. They played in week 2. He had 25 carries for 84 yards. But prior to last week's down game, he was 178-3, 133-1, 103-0. He's just a guy that is going to get the ball a ton, and when he's rolling, he's just impossible to stop in the second half where they have a lead. And I mean, Jacksonville gave 120 yards to Dalvin Cook last week. That was 32 carries, but Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt had 206 yards the week before. James Conner was 13 for 89 in week 11. James Conner of all people. It's just this defense is just getting thrashed everywhere. I think Derrick Henry's a fantastic play this week. Cash games, GPPs will probably be a little bit high there, but I think there's enough running backs, maybe $1,000 less, that maybe keep a little bit of that percentage off Henry. There's a lot of guys on this slate, and obviously as you get the bigger slate, you have more options, so maybe percentages go down a little bit. But Henry over Cook for me for sure this week.
Yeah, I think the percentage itself is probably going to be lower than we are expecting from a guy in such a perfect situation because of the 13 games. But I think, he'll certainly be the highest. The James Conner shade there, man. Oof, poor guy.
Yeah, seriously. I should only do that pre-COVID. I should not do that now. Hopefully he's feeling well. Obviously, he's a cancer survivor, so we do worry about that. But he was definitely struggling at the time when he put up those 13 for 89. Funny with Dalvin Cook last week. We talked about, they talked all week, maybe we'll limit him. All he did was have 38 touches in that game against Jacksonville. Alexander Madison was out that game, so I think that impacted it a little bit too. They just didn't really have an easy way to get him out. But let's jump down a little bit lower. There's a lot of running backs. I found running backs in the mid-range difficult most of the season, but I think there's a lot of playable guys this week. Jump down to you first. In this mid 7,000s, who jumps out to you as someone that you're trying to get in your lineup this week?
It's funny. Aaron Jones makes so much sense. Just as the running back for a big favorite in a game with a high total. But we've talked about it for weeks now. What Aaron Rodgers does at the goal line is just so amazingly tilting when you have somebody like Aaron Jones, that you almost need to just rely on a big, a 30-yard touchdown for him to come, because if they get anywhere remotely close, it just doesn't seem like they can get him in.
It's funny. I played Rodgers and Adams last week, so I liked it, but they got down to the 2 or whatever, and I'm like, oh my god, they're not going to throw it. And they did it again, and they throw it they don't do it, and they throw it again after that.
Right after it, yeah.
They just don't even think about running. It's so wild. And Jones last week was 15 for 130, but he had that 77-yard touchdown right at the end of the game. So you look at it, you're like, oh, he had a huge game, but if he was 16 for whatever that is, 63. Like it's suddenly like, oh, Aaron Jones was quiet again last week. So it's funny how one play can do that. But
it was a weird play too. Like it seemed like it should have ended 5 or 6 times, and all of a sudden he was just in the end zone
twice. I thought he was going to get tackled twice, and all of a sudden he cut back. And I think that Jacksonville's like, just get me out of here.
Yep.
Like, yeah. So, oh no, sorry, that was not Jacksonville last week. Whoever they were playing last week, Philly. That's right. Same thing. A team that's does not want to be out there anymore.
Basically, yeah.
But you look at the matchup against Detroit. They're indoors. Detroit's allowed 23 rushing touchdowns to the running backs, which leads the NFL. David Montgomery and Cordero Patterson had 3 touchdowns rushing the ball last week. Dalvin was 206 for 2 against them in week 9. And then you look back a little bit. Aaron Jones was massive against Detroit in week 2. He had 168 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns, also 68 yards receiving in a touchdown. Matchup-wise, everything lines up for Jones. The price is pretty good at 7,600. They should have a lead. My only reservation is kind of what you mentioned with the inside the 5 touchdown stuff. Is like, it's just who knows what they're going to do there.
I think I'd like to point out that Devonte Adams played 38 snaps in that game.
That's a good point.
And had 3 targets. And Devonte Adams with 3 targets certainly allows Aaron Jones to do whatever he wants. And I just have no thought that he would only have, like, I don't know how you can go into this week and be like, I'm going to play Jones because they figured Devonte Adams out and only held him to 3.
Yeah, he got hurt in the second quarter
right.
of the game. So, I mean, otherwise you probably would have seen 10 targets. So
right.
That's a good point, and that definitely skewed that first week, especially the 4 catches, 68 yards. Like he's not getting that probably if Adams is playing.
Yeah. So I mean, I think Jones makes a ton of sense as another pivot from Henry. I don't think you really need to play both, but I think that works well. But I think it's like the group under. I want to leave Chris Carson in this group. Like he's 6,900, but like I think Chris Carson makes a great play this week against a very overmatched Jets team, especially with Seattle starting to run the ball a little more. They're using him in the passing game. I think there are plenty of people who are going to focus on DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett because the Jets give up tons of yards and points to wide receivers. But I think Carson's a great play this week.
Yeah, I mean, the Jets are so weird because they're just so easy to pass against that teams just aren't running. They've given up 1 rushing touchdown in the last 7 weeks. Like I think we're always like, we got to target these running backs against the Jets because teams are going to be up. And then you look and you're like, oh, well, they've allowed 100-yard rusher all year. It's very strange that, and I guess it's just so easy. They have nobody to stop the pass. And we saw it with Derek Carr last week. Even we have no timeouts and the game's almost over, they still are easy to pass against. So
yeah, sorry,
that's my one shot against you and Greg Williams.
He's gone now. Problem solved.
Yeah, everything's fine now. I do agree on Carson. I think that he's looked good. The snaps went up last week. He's up to 42 snaps. He was 13 for 65. He had three catches, 45 yards. He has 4 receiving touchdowns this year, which is like I think more than he has his whole career. I think was the stat I saw. I think he had 3 coming in, and they're 13.5-point favorites. We know that Pete Carroll loves to run the ball. He's one coach that I think even if they're passing the ball easily, if the second half they're leading, probably hands the ball off a lot. So I think Carson does make a lot of sense too. And I mean, our old standby James Robinson is still in this range. Like he's been priced up. He was 6,300 2 weeks ago, which we talked about at the time was an absurd price. But 7,500 against Tennessee, we've seen they don't really get game scripted out with him. He had 24 more touches last week for 108 yards. That's 94 or more total yards in 6 straight games. He was good last time against Tennessee in week 2, 16 for 102. The keys, one thing I wanted to highlight with Robinson is you look at his touches. The last 6 weeks, Jacksonville's played some close games, played some blowouts. His touches are 26, 25, 25, 19, 27, 24. Like the consistency in touches is insane with him. Like they no matter what the score is, how the game's going, Robinson touches the ball 22, 23, 24 times a game.
Yeah, he seems like the guy every week that I have in my lineup, and then like ultimately I tinker away from him. And he has like a great game every week. And I feel like that must happen to a lot of people because he's never like overly popular.
I just think because he's James Robinson on the Jaguars. Like it's just, you're like, oh, it's just so much sexier to go to Aaron Jones or Dalvin Cook or whoever it may be. I think I just been kind of slotting him in though. Like every week he's not massive, but he's just so solid and so good that it creates a really nice base at one of the running back spots. Like I said, he's priced up than he was a couple weeks ago. But 7,500, I still think he's very much in play.
Yeah, it's just funny to you'd be perfectly fine if over the last 6 weeks you decided to pay 6,000 to 7,000 for a running back on a touchdown underdog, and he'd get the touches, and it's perfectly fine.
And every single week he's come through. Yeah, it's
right.
crazy.
And you could say that he had that good game against Tennessee back in week 2, and he wasn't even really James Robinson back then.
Yeah.
He was just a guy. So, I think it's another one. I think there are a ton of running backs you can play this week. And yet I still think Henry's going to be dominating the ownership at least. Yeah,
I found myself as I was building lineups kind of getting into 2 guys in this range was I was trying to build. And then if you go Henry and a cheaper running back, you got to find the cheaper running back, which I think is a little bit tougher this week. But sticking in this range, Austin Eckler is 7,000 this week. Great matchup against the Falcons. The Chargers are tough right now. They have failed to cover 6 weeks in a row. Anthony Lynn has the worst against the spread record of any coach. He's I forget what it is, 19-38 or something like that. But they got shut out last week by the Patriots and looked as awful as you could look in a shutout. They earned that shutout. Their special teams is the most egregious thing I've seen in the NFL in a long time. I've never seen a special teams that are this poorly coached. They play this bad. I mean, they had 10 guys in the field twice and turned into big plays. Not like they did it once. They're oh my God, can't we mess that up? Let's fix it. They did it again. It's crazy. But Eckler kind of got game scripted out last week. The game was just weird, but he still had 9 targets in that game. He still was very involved, at least in the passing game. But the game just got away from them. But Atlanta's bad against the pass, pretty good against the run. They're only at 3.7 yards per carry, but they get beat by receivers out of the backfield a bunch. But 25 targets in 2 weeks with Herbert. Lots of PPR upside if the targets stay there. Eckler 7,000. Another guy in this range, I think, very, very playable this week against the Falcons.
Yeah. Eckler was the second guy in my lineup behind Henry.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah. The hesitation I had, which is the hesitation I have every week whenever I have somebody from or against the Atlanta Falcons, is that
I figured that was coming.
I've just been burned too much, and obviously you can't let something as stupid as that make the decisions for you. But I think the clearest thing is they got absolutely blown out last week, and he was still targeted 9 times. The targets are just it's peak Kamara. And probably
it's talented targets too. It's not like these guys that we get like Chris Thompson or J.D. McKissick where they get a lot of targets, but they got to catch 10 for it to work. Eckler at any point can bust into these plays. Talented targets is pretty important.
Yep, and I think he's probably going to end up with more rushing attempts than Kamara would get anyway. But I think if you're in this situation, if we still had Drew Brees, we have Kamara at 7,100. I think you'd look at the two of them and you'd say, no, I want Eckler.
Yeah, and Kamara with Breeze definitely would be a different animal. And the funny thing with the Falcons you mentioned, if you were to flip on box scores later and you saw that they won 31-7 or lost 31-7, I don't think you'd be surprised either way.
Totally.
You totally see, you see the Chargers killing this game. You can see the Chargers getting. This is one of those games that I actually like the Chargers this week. They're plus 2.5, plus 2.5 at home against the Falcons. I'm going to take that, but I think the overreaction from last week is huge, but no Julio may alter that line a little bit, but I do like the Chargers this week. But
I think there might be some fantasy analysis clouding our view of the team. It's one of them where the Chargers are awesome, but it's they're actually not very good at winning football games, which
that's true
tends to be the important part.
And I was a little surprised, just from a fantasy angle. I think the over is 49 or 49.5. I think this is a game that could get back and forth pretty good. I think both these teams can struggle on defense. I think that's a game that goes over the number 2. You mentioned Kamara. He was 15 for 88 rushing last week. Had the 30-yard touchdown that kind of made his day. But you still look at the targets. 3 targets with Taysom Hill, only 2 catches. He has 6 total targets in 3 games with Taysom Hill. He always has upside. He's one of the most talented guys out there, but it's hard to get excited about paying for Kamara right now without the receiving upside.
Yeah, I want no part of it.
It was good last week, but it has to work exactly like it did last week for it to work. And they should be up on Philly and they should run, but Taysom Hill had 14 rushes last week, and that just takes every time he runs the ball, it takes a touch away from Kamara. And as a fantasy manager, you just don't want that.
Yeah, you could argue that he had a ceiling game last week, a ceiling Taysom Hill game, and he had 17 points on DraftKings. So, no thanks. Yeah. That used to be his floor.
I know it's wild. It's interesting because Hill's actually played pretty well last week and had 83 yards rushing and 2 touchdown passes. And interesting to see how different that offense is going to look in next week or so when Drew Brees comes back, if he does come back next week. But dropping down a little bit, we've got last week's hero. We have the running back who led all running backs in points last week with 27.1. We talked about him a lot at 5,500. He's now 6,500. We have David Montgomery in another insanely good matchup. It's I can forget about David Montgomery now. He did well in that good matchup. And then you look up, you're like, oh, he plays Houston this week. You're like, damn. So your boy Jonathan Taylor had 91 yards against Houston last week. That's how bad it's gotten for Houston.
We'll get to him too.
The week before, Adrian Peterson and Kerryon Johnson were over 100 yards total against Houston. So we talked about it all year. I mean, Houston's terrible against the run. I don't know, Montgomery, like the last 2 weeks, 143 and 111 total yards. Houston's leading the NFL, or I guess trailing the NFL, with a 5.2 yards per carry and 21.5 fantasy points per game to running backs. Like, the matchup is insane. He is priced up 1,000. Does the price up get you off Montgomery? Or you still aboard for this run? I
think Montgomery is the definition of the player that you should play, and you're not going to because you don't want to pay $6,500 for Montgomery. And we're going to look on Sunday night, and we're like, oh, he had $120 and 2 touchdowns, and we're like, I just didn't want to do it.
It's so funny you say that because we talked last week. Like I had 2 lineups last week, and you and I are in this like RotoWire quote unquote expert league that we play in, and I kind of got away from in that lineup from like all the obvious plays, like Montgomery and all these like list of guys that were like I really liked on the podcast, and I put them all on my second team for some odd reason. And my first team was like 130 points, and my second team was 205 points. So it's like it's just exactly what you say. It's like you should play the guy that looks obvious and you should play. And I got away from that a little bit last week with Montgomery and only played him on my secondary teams, which still worked there, but like same kind of thing. Like I don't know, 6,500 against Houston with the way he's been touching the ball and the carries. Like you can argue against him because he's David Montgomery, but you mentioned it last week. Like he looks a little bit different running the ball the last few weeks. Like he looks the way he's making guys miss, making some cuts. Like he looks a little bit different than he did early in the year. I don't know if he's fresh, if he's fully healthy. I don't know what it is, but you pointed out last week, and I watched the game after we talked about it, and I agree. I think he looked a little bit different.
Yeah, I just think. I mean, the snap share and the carry. I mean, he gets every carry basically, yeah. And so I just think if it was almost anybody else. And they had this situation, if you were just like, here's the running back against this team, and here are his stats, and he's 6,500, and Derrick Henry is 8,700, and you'd be like, yeah, give him to me. And then you're like, it's David Montgomery, and you're like, oh.
So do you play Montgomery at the same price, $100 more, fine, over Ezekiel Elliott at Cincinnati in a game the Cowboys are 3.5-point favorites? Zeke looked pretty good last week, 18 for 77 against Baltimore. Stopped 3 times on the 1 yard line, and then they threw it to Amari Cooper, which almost cost me a lot of money in my season-long league that I ended up winning by like a few points. And like my wife, I'm watching the end of this Cowboys game, and it was 34-17. I'm like stressing out. My wife was like, I don't know how you do this. Like, this is so stressful to me. She's like in the back of we have a media room. She's in the back of our media room. Like, I don't know how you just like her hand in her head. She's like, just don't throw it to number 19. I was like, you got to relax. It's okay. It's going to work out. But it's funny how we just like these like stressful moments that I'm so used to, like are stressful, but I'm used to it. And my wife was like freaking out about it. It was pretty funny. But
it takes a special kind of person to sweat like we do.
A special kind of sick person. Yes. Zeke hasn't scored a rushing touchdown since Dak last played a game, which is almost impossible to think about the fact that, the Cowboys get to the goal line, they give him the ball, but they're clearly a different offense with Andy Dalton than they were with who were they were throwing in there before. Like you could tell that like at least they're running stuff, and with Dalton he can make some passes. Like they aren't good, but they're a little bit different. Cincinnati's allowing 5.0 yards per carry, so they're really bad against the run. Zeke is a favorite. Cincinnati's bad. Do you entertain Zeke down at 6,600 for the first time in a long time?
Yeah, and it's like I could play Zeke instead of David Montgomery.
I know, sure. Right? Like I'm sucked into that too. And like you said, we're gonna turn on the game. I'm like, oh my god, what was I doing? But
right. No,
that's an interesting little shift there from a lot of people who can play Montgomery this week.
I think the funny thing about Elliott is, you say he got stopped 3 times like in close last week. Like I felt like that was
in a row.
Right. That happens with Dak too. And like I think we always joke about how many guys we roster that get stopped at the 1 yard line. Like if the field was 99 yards, we'd be millionaires. And so, but Elliott has always been that. But like the possibility of Dak faking it and running himself, I felt like at least gave defenses a little bit of hesitation on like totally crashing on Elliott. And Dalton certainly does not provide that. And so like, I don't know. I think like if you saw that price, in August, you'd be like, oh my God, yeah, of course I would take that.
Does Zeke break his like something, right?
Right. And so I think Zeke is a big reason why people will say, no, I don't want to play David Montgomery.
I just wonder if people have been so burned by Elliott this year that they don't go there. But I mean, I think he's finally at a price plus a matchup.
Yeah.
Where entertaining it for the first time for seriously in a while.
Yep.
So let's jump down to some cheaper guys. We've talked about a lot of guys we like in the mid-range, but some cheaper guys. I found it a little harder to find cheaper guys this week than usually. There's not that obvious one. Now, David Johnson may not play this week. If you like Duke Johnson, he's priced down to 4,800. He was so bad when he played. And the Bears defense is not quite the same as it was, but like at the Bears is not really a spot that I'm going to target.
Yep.
And Houston doesn't. I mean, they just don't run the ball. Watson's so clearly far and away their whole offense that they just either he's running it or he's passing it. He's 4,800. I guess I could see that, but I don't know. I don't get really excited. What do you do with Jonathan Taylor? We talked about him. I joked about him being your boy earlier because we kind of wrote him off a few weeks ago, and he's coming on the last couple of weeks. 90 yards 2 weeks ago, 91 yards last week, 7 catches in those 2 games. Good to see him being used out of the backfield. Still only 33 snaps last week, which sticks out to me a little bit. There's still a timeshare aspect to the situation. Pretty good matchup this week. The Raiders are allowing 4.7 yards per carry. The Colts are favored in this game on the road. Do you even think about going to Taylor? And you're a cash player. Can you entertain Taylor at all in your lineup?
Definitely.
All right.
You were saying you didn't like anyone down here, and I thought it was only because you have permanently scratched Jonathan Taylor off your list. Because, I mean, at 5,800 against the Raiders, he's not getting a ton of as many snaps as you want, but he's getting touches on those snaps. Little of your Damian Harris situation.
The touches look good too. Like he's made more guys miss and broken more tackles the last 2 weeks than he had the whole start of the season. So he looks like he might be finally starting to get comfortable in the NFL. And he's obviously a talented guy and was crazy good in college. But I'm still a little bit scarred. I'll admit it that I still worry that like I'm gonna flip the game on and Naheem Hines just goes in the end zone for the third time and I just want to really break something.
I mean that's certainly in the realm of possibility. So it's not. I mean this is not like a risk-free play, but it's 5,700. So you have to take some. But like 90 and 91 rushing yards in the past 2 games, 7 targets over that span. Like I think we obviously worry about Hines. I think Jordan Wilkins is like not even a factor at this point.
Yeah, we can toss that one.
So. But there are plenty of running backs that we play that occasionally come out on third down and passing plays. And so I think if you can get Taylor at that price, which is another one you can play instead of David Montgomery, then yeah, I think he could definitely be popular. And I don't think he's the only one down here that you could play.
So the other 2 down here, there's a guy 100 below him and 200 below him. We got Wayne Gallman against the Cardinals. Gallman was great last week against Seattle. Somehow 16 carries, 135 yards. Granted, he had a 60-yard carry in there, but they all count. He had 94 yards and a touchdown the week before. He's clearly the guy. Like when they run the ball, they're handing it to Wayne Gallman. Daniel Jones might be back, which I think helps him. You know, that run play option kind of threaten there that helps you out. No factor in the passing game. And I'm a little worried that Alfred Morris came in twice at the goal line. I don't know what year we're in that Alfred Morris is coming at the goal line, but Gallman has been the starter for 5 weeks. He's been a top 20 running back all 5 weeks. Like that level of consistency, that matters at this point. Like 5 weeks is enough of a time where like, Wayne Gallman's a pretty big part of this offense.
He has he didn't score last week, 135 yards, but didn't score. But he had a touchdown in 5 straight games before that. Like he's had double-digit points on DraftKings for 6 straight weeks. So yeah, he's the guy. I think in that range, I think you're probably still playing Taylor, but I think he's perfectly fine.
So if I jump down 100, Myles Gaskin is against Kansas City, and tough game script. They're 7.5-point dogs. Anytime you play Kansas City, you run that risk of Tyreek Hill having 200 yards in the first quarter, and you're down. You're down 21-0 before you touch the ball twice. But he was very involved last week. He had 21 carries for 90 yards. He had 2 catches for 51 yards. He was good out of the backfield. He had 20. He had a 26 and 25-yard catch. He's just whenever he plays, he's super. Like he was his first game back, and all of a sudden, it's your job. You go touch the ball 23 times. Like they're very willing to let him touch the ball a lot. With Tua playing back there, they're not really opening up the passing game, so they use him a lot. Melvin Gordon quietly had 131 yards against Kansas City last week. Ronald Jones had 103 total yards before, so they've been running backs have got them a little bit the last couple of weeks. I find it hard to get excited about Gaskin, but Gaskin at 5,600, a guy's going to touch the ball 20 times. Like you got to at least entertain that possibility.
So he had 3 carries inside the 5 last week.
How many negative yards did he have?
Well, so the people who played him, I think it felt like he had 17 carries inside. It was 6 carries inside the 10 and 3 inside the 5, and he couldn't score. So I think there's some recency bias isn't really, well, maybe it is negative recency bias, just because he got burned, or he burned people so much last week. But I mean, Kansas City is better against the pass than the run, and if Miami can keep that game somewhat close using Gaskin, then I think he makes sense. I mean, I don't know if blindly you play him over Gallman, but I think he's fine. And I think Kenyon Drake right below both of them is perfectly fine too.
Yeah, Drake's frustrating. Like you always wait for that big play, and just kind of frustrating. Without Kyla running, I don't like Drake quite as much because you don't have that like dual threat. But yeah, I mean, Drake is, and he's getting the thing with Drake now is if they do get inside the 5, they're gonna give it to him because Kyler's not going anywhere. So yeah, that's at some point the Cardinals are gonna have to change that, and Kyler's gonna have to run the ball because they're almost out of the playoffs now as it is, but they're gonna have to like take a shot at it. But we'll talk about Kyler when we get to quarterbacks. But yeah, I mean, I think that Drake always in that offense they run a lot of plays. That offense is kind of not great right now, but can work. Any of these guys below that you like at all? We got Devontae Booker if Josh Jacobs doesn't play at 5,300. Gio Bernard against Dallas is 5,000. Obviously, Joe Mixon, I don't think ever is going to play. And then you got Duke Johnson. The J.D. McKissick is 4,900. Antonio Gibson's out in this game. He had 10 catches last week against Pittsburgh. He probably needs the right game script. He probably needs Washington to be trailing the 49ers and have to catch up. I worry that if they get ahead in that game, maybe they don't pass to him a lot. But at 4,900, the Niners are good against the run, but not so good against the pass. So I guess it kind of works out there. Any of those like 4 guys, under Drake that you're really interested in this week?
I think McKissick could be weirdly popular.
I do too.
Just because certainly on DraftKings with a full PPR, like it just plays right into him. There is one guy in this range who happens to be playing in the game that we think will blast the over. He certainly shares carries, but I think part of it was injury, and it's a full-fledged revenge game. What do you think about 4,800 for Todd Gurley against the Chargers? There was an article in the whatever, I forget which paper it was out there, about how Gurley was supposed to be like the foundational piece of the team for this new stadium, and his first game in it will be for the Falcons.
So my only point is, you do know Todd Gurley played for the Rams, not the Chargers, yes?
I'm not Gurley. No.
You called it a revenge game.
Oh, did I? Oh, I'm sorry. My fault.
LA.
I meant the stadium, though.
Yeah.
Stadium. My fault.
He just looks so terrible right now to me. I don't know. He looks like he's hurt. He had 8 carries for 16 yards last week. I'd play the guys. I'd play. I don't like Gio Bernard or Duke Johnson.
No, you don't want to play those guys.
I don't trust Todd Gurley. He could fall in the end. He could fall in the end zone twice, which is the real game shift you're looking for here in a high total game. But I don't know. I think he's sharing carries enough and not looking good in the carries he shares, and I'm far away.
The irony of me messing that up is that I mix up Gurley and Gordon all the time, and yet so that would have made sense.
That's all right. I had to give you a smart ass reply to it anyway.
Well deserved.
The funny part of it is I looked and I'm like, did Gurley play for the Chargers or the Rams? So I actually looked it up as we were going because I was like, did I mess that up?
No, I'm the idiot. Don't worry about it.
You're usually better with
but
that
stuff. I just, for all those guys we talked about, I think McKissick is going to be the most popular of that group, just because like nobody likes to play Gio Bernard. And
for good reason.
Yeah, and everyone else just doesn't have kind of the workload that you want, and McKissick might get it.
I think the key for me in this range is that I can easily go up to Taylor, Gaskin, or Gallman for under 6,000 and like him pretty significantly more. So I don't think I need to play Devontae Booker 5,300 when he played 33 snaps and Jalen Richard played 32. Like I just don't think it works when I can go up to a guy that I know is going to touch the ball a bunch.
Yep, totally agree.
Cool. Let's jump into the passing game. First, a note from our sponsor, BetMGM. Sports bettors know that magic happens when you turn a hunch into action and apply the right amount of expertise. That's why BetMGM has teamed up with RotoWire to offer new BetMGM subscribers a free 6-month RotoWire subscription when they place their first bet. Register on the BetMGM app or website, and once you make your first sports wager, you'll receive a season's length of RotoWire's unmatched sports insights. Find out why BetMGM is the king of sportsbooks by signing up and placing your first bet today. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. 21 years or older to wager. Colorado, Indiana, New Jersey, Nevada, Tennessee, and West Virginia only. Please gamble responsibly. Have a gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700 in Colorado, Nevada, 1-800-GAMBLER in New Jersey and West Virginia. In Tennessee, call or text the red line at 800-889-9789. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana. Promotional offer is not available in Nevada. So we'll jump to the passing game. I found the running backs really interesting this week, so we spent a lot of time on those. We jump to the passing game. The top of the slate, we've got Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson between 7,500 and 8,100. Mahomes is the top of that 8,100. You're the Jets fan. Talk to me a little bit about Russell Wilson this week. Like, he just looks so good on paper. Like, they're a huge favorite. They'll score a lot of points. You wonder how much they're going to throw, how much they're going to shut it down late, but like, teams can just throw so easily against the Jets. I don't know if Pete Carroll's going to be tempted by that or tempted to hand the ball to Carson and Hyde and all those guys the second half. So how do you feel about this game?
I thought it was enough of Carson potential that and less game script and more just Carroll himself. Yeah. Seems like he wants to get Carson involved more. And so I think Rodgers is the best play in this group. And because he's cheaper than Wilson, it was kind of easy for me to say, no, I'll just play Rodgers. It's a bummer that like Watson finally gets up in this group in the worst matchup that you could probably have, at least for his remaining schedule. And like, can you ever actually go wrong with Mahomes? So like, I think it's Rodgers and Mahomes at the top of the four. And I think Rodgers probably separates himself because he throws so much into the goal line. Simple as that.
Yeah. He is priced up a little bit. 6,800 last week for Rodgers was insane. He was fine. He wasn't huge last week. And obviously those people that got the Derek Carr game, benefited immensely from that. But I'm so tempted by Wilson this week, I got to be honest. But the last four games, he hasn't topped 270 yards. He has 4 touchdowns total in those games. There's a part of me that thinks that Pete Carroll has to let him loose, but it's Pete Carroll and he's one stubborn bastard. And I worry that it's going to be, whatever it is, 21-6 at halftime. And all of a sudden, we just see Chris Carson and Carlos Hyde touch the ball 9,000 times in the second half. And, Wilson is efficient, but has 230 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I worry about that. But then the Jets are just so bad against the pass. I mean, Derek Carr was 381 and 3 last week. Ryan Fitzpatrick had 257, 2 touchdowns the week before. And Justin Herbert was huge 3 weeks before that. But I'm tempted by Wilson. But I think you're right. I think Rodgers and Mahomes do make a lot more sense. The opposite of what Seattle's done the last 5 weeks is what Kansas City's done. Like, they were kind of holding back on their pass offense a little bit, and all of a sudden, the last 5 weeks they are bonkers. Mahomes has attempted 40+ passes in 5 straight games. Like, that is crazy for a team that is up a lot. They're just throwing. He's over 300 yards passing 5 straight. I really want to see the game plan in this one. Miami likes to blitz, and if you blitz Patrick Mahomes, you absolutely will get killed. Like, he's like 9.5 yards per attempt against the blitz. Miami loves to blitz. I just don't think you do it this game. If they do, he's going to thrash them. I think that Brian Flores has to come up with a different game plan. But you're right. You can't go wrong with Mahomes. I don't think you can go wrong with Rodgers either. You know how much I love Deshaun Watson, but outside on the road without Will Fuller, he had 341 yards the first game without Will Fuller, but no touchdown passes. He's running the ball a lot, which is helpful. Like, he has that rushing floor of 30 to 35 yards now, which he didn't have earlier in the year. I love Watson, but it's hard for me to play him over the other 3 guys with the situation right now.
It's funny to me that you said Rodgers wasn't that great last week when he had 295 and 3 touchdowns.
It's just there were so many quarterbacks that did really well, and you and I talked about we wanted that 300-yard bonus to get him up there. Like, it felt like he was good for the price, but he wasn't that huge breakout made the slate. Whereas if the guys that played Carr just got so many more points that it hurt in that regard. Super annoying too. And if Marquez Valdes-Scantling doesn't drop a 50-yard pass that's right in his hands, where Aaron Rodgers gave him the look of death by the way. He looked at him like, I am never throwing you the ball again, and I don't know if he did. It's you don't want to be on Rodgers' bad side, I don't think. There's a lot of people that can attest to that. But he dropped down a little bit. I do want to talk Kyla Murray just for a second, because he was a guy that was so automatic the first 8 or 9 games of the year. I saw a stat. The first 9 games, he had 5.5 designed run plays per game. So those are plays that are designed for him to actually run the ball, not plays where he scrambles or gets rushed or runs, but actually designed for him to run 5.5 of those. He has 9 total last 3 games. Wow. So anybody that's his shoulder's fine, everything's good, they have changed the way they've called offense the last 3 weeks. And it's very clear they don't want him to get hit. There's going to be a moment where the shoulder is okay and they're going to want him again. He's probably going to have a huge game, but I have a hard time paying 7,200 right now when I don't know what the offense is going to look like.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, particularly on a slate where we have plenty of other options, like I just don't. Exactly. And the Giants' defense has actually been pretty good recently, and so.
Sure, the Giants team's been pretty good.
Yeah,
when they won 4 in a row, and it's wild that this division we're like it's going to be so bad, and Dallas and Philly might win 7 games and fight for the division. It's going to be the Giants and Washington doing that. It's kind of crazy. But Kyler the last 2 games 5.0 and 4.4 yards per attempt. So not only is he not running, he's getting the ball out quickly and they're throwing it short. Like it's a gross offense right now, and he always has that upside, and I get that. If you're like in a season-long playoff, like you got to use him for the upside, but I don't see how you can use him in DFS right now, and you might get lucky and he might start running again, but you're kind of banking on the fact they're going to change their offense back, and it's hard to see right now.
Yeah, there's just plenty of other places to go. Like that's kind of what I just keep going back to, and like that game doesn't even have that high of a total. Like we talk about how many high total games there are, and even some that aren't that high total, like that Chargers game. Like that could go over, and this
you've got one of the best cornerbacks in the league guarding his number one receiver. You got James Bradbury. I don't see it at all. But you're gonna hate me for this one. But I go down $300. I actually really like Tom Brady this week at 6,900. I know that you're gonna roll your eyes and get mad at me for that, but multiple touchdowns in 6 of 7 games. Brady struggles with pressure, but Minnesota's 27th in the league in pressure rate, so it might be a spot where he can keep his jersey clean and throw the ball a bunch. 340 plus yards in 3 of his last 6. So he's had some down games. When he plays well, when their offense is clicking, he really has a lot of upside. Mike Evans is questionable, which scares me a little bit, but I think they have enough weapons where even if Evans doesn't play, you got Brown, you got Godwin, you got Gronk. There's enough there. Mike Glennon had 280 yards on Minnesota. Teddy Bridgewater 267, which don't sound great, but those are weak quarterbacks. When you look at what the good quarterbacks did against Minnesota, Aaron Rodgers, Matt Ryan, Russell Wilson, 4 games against them. They played Rodgers twice, 14 touchdowns against those quarterbacks. Good quarterbacks have really smoked Minnesota this year. I know you hate it. I know.
I mean, just play Justin Herbert, man. I get it. The Brady makes total sense. Game stacking, that one makes sense too, because you got the excellent receivers on the other side you can come back with.
Yep. I haven't liked Brady in a lot of games, and I was one that didn't like them coming into the season, so I haven't done it to you too much. But this is a week where I think Brady's a pretty good play. But you mentioned Herbert. 6,800. I do like that play this week too. I like the bounce back, and he was horrible last week. There's no way around it. He looked like a rookie quarterback against Bill Belichick, which is like what we talked about. And like he was 26 and 53 for 209. Like 209 and 53 passes is
that's crazy.
Bad. Like it's hard to do that. So. But Taysom Hill was good against them last week, passing too. He had 2 touchdown passes. Derek Carr was bad a couple weeks ago against Atlanta, but that was a weird game. Atlanta's just been a great matchup all year against quarterbacks. They've given up the most quarterback points per game in the league. I know they've been a little bit better recently, but this feels like a nice bounce back spot for Herbert. I think this game gets more back and forth than everybody else. The Vegas total does. I think it goes over to the total, which is 49.5. I like this game as a game stack game. So I like Herbert. I like Brady, like 2 guys in this range. If I want to save a little bit, I think both of them are really good plays.
Yeah, totally agree. And we joked that he threw 53 passes last week. He threw 52 the week before.
Yep.
Like they
drop back a freaking ton. There's no way around it. And with Eckler back, like
I was gonna say Eckler back, and they're like, no, we're gonna throw more.
Exactly, you throw more. Like it's great. Like you just don't have to hand it to Joshua Kelly and Justin Jackson, all those guys. But I think it's a really nice bounce back spot for her. Yeah. I think he puts us on good stats.
Yeah, I think for cash game consideration, I started with Aaron Rodgers, but I think if I need any extra salary, going down to Herbert and I guess Brady would be fine.
It's not so good. You got to play Brady against your stomach there, I don't want you to feel sick all day Sunday. But, what do you do with Taysom Hill at 6,600 this week?
Taysom Hill feels a little David Montgomery-ish to me, of like a guy I should probably play, and I'm just like, I'll take anybody else, please. It's
so funny when we look at what Hill's done these 3 games, just how bonkers the first half game plan against Atlanta was.
Yeah.
Like, they literally came out, we talked about it before, but they came out with the Drew Brees game plan, and it was so bad. And in the last 5 halves, he's been very effective. He had 14 carries for 83 yards last week, 232 yards passing. But you have to use him in that way as a threat of the run, otherwise it makes no sense. It's not a 5-step drop back and throw the ball kind of guy. And the fact that Sean Payton came out with that the first half was so weird. But Hill just drops back. He either runs or he throws it to Michael Thomas, which is kind of what we've seen. Like Michael Thomas over 100 yards in the 2 Atlanta games. Running quarterbacks have been good against Philly, too. They're playing the Eagles this week. Dan Jones has 156 yards rushing in 2 games. Lamar Jackson at 108. So they have struggled against kind of the RPO-type quarterback. The rush floor has just been great with Taysom. 51-2, 44-2, 83 rushing yards last week, no touchdowns. I don't think I can do it when I have Herbert and Brady right there in price with the those like massive passing games, but like I wouldn't begrudgingly be playing Hill right now against an Eagles defense that maybe is looking forward to hanging out in Cancun in a month.
Was that big Daniel Jones game the one where he fell after running for?
I think so. Yes.
Whatever.
It should have been like an 80-yard touchdown. It was like a 65-yard
stumble.
Neat joke instead. Yeah.
No, I think Hill's fine. I don't think anybody plays him in cash, which is weird because like last season we were paying up for Lamar because of the rushing floor, and we paid up for Kyler early in the season because of the rushing floor, and yet for Taysom Hill I'm just like I think it's just such ugly football that I just don't want to have to cheer for it.
And I think the passing floor is really low, and that always come into effect. Like
his 37 passes last week.
It's crazy. I mean, I guess what you do against when you play against the Falcons, but I don't know. You give me outdoors against Philly, I just I don't know. I go Herbert and Brady this week over him.
Yeah, I hear you on that one.
Real quick, down cheap, there's one guy that's kind of sticks out that everybody's talked about all week that we have to talk about a little bit. 5,100 on DraftKings. We have Jalen Hurts in that game against Taysom Hill against New Orleans. I am not doing it. I think the matchup is too difficult. The first full game against the Saints, I'm not doing it. But there is a real case to be made here. There is a rushing floor with him, too. And if you get a rushing floor at 5,100, that becomes a pretty interesting factor, especially if you want to throw him out there in GPP. He played half the game or so last week in relief for Wentz. He was 5 for 12 for 109. They kind of threw it downfield a little bit with him. But he had 29 rushing yards in the game, too. And obviously he's a guy that was huge stats in college at Oklahoma, Alabama, then Oklahoma. He's talented. He can get out of the pocket. His offensive line absolutely sucks. Like, it's just horrible. And New Orleans hasn't given up 300-yard passing all year. After a lot of touchdown passes early, like they've been really good against the pass. No 300 touchdown passes the whole season is pretty wild in today's NFL. I don't think I could do it, but I get why people might because the price is so insanely cheap, and if you get like 45 yards rushing, like suddenly it gets pretty interesting pretty quickly.
But what about the same price for the guy facing the team that's allowed the second most fantasy points to quarterbacks, including the most passing yards?
Who is that?
Sam Darnold.
You're going back to Sam Darnold, huh?
There's no back. But like the Seahawks have been an absolute sieve this season. They've been better lately.
A little bit better lately, but you're right. I mean, perfect game script too.
Also, the better lately is banged up Kyler, Carson Wentz, and Colt McCoy.
That's a very good point. Like I think you look at stats like a little bit lately, you have to look at who they've been playing. So. I think that's interesting. I think that I wish Denzel Mims was playing because I think that's another weapon that like you can really hit a big play with. But yeah, I'll say this: I'd rather play Darnold than Hurts. I'm not playing Darnold, but don't get me wrong. If you take that sound clip, make sure you include the Hurts part. But I think the risk of Hurts, I could see why people want to play Hurts and he's so cheap. I just think the risk of a game where he has like 8 points is real. Like I think there's a game that the way that the Saints just
the Saints are good.
Yeah, they're really good.
Their
really
defense
is on fire right now. Like they're playing really well.
Yeah.
Any love for Mitch Trubisky against Houston at 5,600?
No.
Yeah, me either. I just it's a great matchup. Houston's terrible, but I just don't think there's enough upside in that Bears passing game to do it.
Why would I play Trubisky when David Montgomery's going to have 3 touchdowns?
It's a fair point. That's exactly what happened last week. Except one of them was Cordero. But yeah. Let's jump into receivers. I think receivers are really fun this week too. But first, a note from our sponsor, PropSwap. Smart sports bettors always know where to find the best odds before placing a bet. That's why smart bettors use PropSwap. You can always find the best odds on PropSwap because you're buying directly from other bettors like yourself. See a ticket you like, but think the price is too high? Submit a bid for a price you think is fair, then buy it. PropSwap sellers are always willing to negotiate, and we all know bookies never will. And for a limited time, our listeners get up to $500 in bonus cash. Just use a promo code ROTO500. That's promo code ROTO500. And PropSwap will match your first deposit up to $500. Become a smarter sports bettor today. Go to PropSwap.com or download the PropSwap app. With receivers, we've gotten to the point, kind of like Michael Thomas last year. We got to start at the one guy who separated himself at the top is Devonte Adams. 9,300 on DraftKings, 9,600 on FanDuel. Just a stud every week. Like last week, can we pay up for Adams? I did it. 10 for 121, 2 touchdowns on 12 targets. Like, he has 8+ targets every full game he's played. He scored in 7 straight games, and he has 11 touchdowns in that stretch. Like, that is, it usually gets the guys like, you see the game log is like 1, 1, 1, 1. You get like that weird, like 6 in a row. His is like 1, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. It's just a crazy game log to look at. He's played 9 full games this year. So he's played 9 games where he played the full game. In 5 of those 9, he has been one of the top 2 receivers in the league. So not a number 1 receiver. Like, people use wide receiver 1 for like 1 through 12 on the week. He's been wide receiver 1 or 2 in 55% of the weeks he's played games. That is an impossible, insane stat. In today's NFL, where you always get some receivers that go off, he's been 55% of the weeks he's been 1 or 2. Like, that's the most amazing stat to me.
That is pretty wild.
And it's a great matchup. Like,
yeah,
Will Fuller went crazy against them 2 weeks ago. DJ Moore, 127 yards before that. Like, it all lines up. It's just a matter of how you build your lineup this week if a $9,300 receiver makes sense or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's expensive. I think there are plenty of ways you can get him in. Like, it's not like a slate where it's like impossible to get him in. We talked about all these cheaper running backs you can play. I think if you pay up for 2 running backs, then you're not probably getting any of the upper tier guys. And if you are, it's probably not Adams, but it's more like, I think it's going to come down to weird things like, do I want Adams or Aaron Jones, or Adams or Eckler? And then you have to see kind of like which $6,000 wide receivers there are. And if you'd rather just play Jonathan Taylor, then now you have a little bit more money to go get Adams. But I mean, I'm not sure what the price is that you get to where you're like, I can't play Adams at that price, but 9,300 is not it yet.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to how you build your lineup this week. I think there's no like me arguing against using him. Everything is positive for Adams, and the way they run their offense inside the 10-yard line is so absurd, but it's like so built to get Devonte Adams the ball. It's just made for a receiver right now. But as we jump down a little bit, there's 2 interesting guys in the mid-8s that I think are definitely worth discussing. The first is Tyreek Hill. The second is DK Metcalf. Tyreek Hill, I think we have this like thought in our minds. It's kind of like he's a boomer bust guy. Like, if he hits the big play, he wins. His targets last 4 weeks since they've really opened up the offense: 18, 14, 15, and 10. Like, double-digit targets 4 weeks in a row is not what I think of when I think of Tyreek Hill. I think of 7 targets and then he goes 4 for 106 and a touchdown. Like, you get that one big 50-yard play, and they've changed how they run a little bit. Like, they've thrown the ball a ton the last 5 weeks, and it's Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce with a ton of targets every single week, the way they've built this offense right now. Last week he had a penalty. He had the touchdown that everybody saw that he caught. He didn't know he caught it. Like, he thought the ball bounced and nobody else saw it. So it was a touchdown that would have come back on reversal. He didn't challenge. And then he lost another one by penalty. Like, it could have been a huge game. He was still 6 for 98 without all that. So still really good. I think Miami, you think maybe can hang in this game a little more than most teams. They're only 7.5-point underdogs. He has 95+ yards in 405. Miami has been pretty good against wide receiver 1s, but Tyreek Hill's in a spot right now where if you're going to give him double-digit targets, like, he is insanely dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, I think you laid it all out. Like, I agree. He completely felt like a guy that was like not a cash game play because he didn't get enough targets. And if you're kind of relying on him either catching a long ball or catching a short one and running it long, like, you just can't do that. But yeah, the volume, I think the biggest thought is how much of a difference, literally straight up fantasy point wise, am I getting if I play Hill over Travis Kelce? And we'll get to tight end and why people tend not to play Travis Kelce. But like, if Kelce was a wide receiver at 7,000, I don't think anybody's playing Hill.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it's just Kelsey's been crazy consistent too. But then right here at this pretty price, 8,400, we have DK Metcalf going against your Jets, who cannot stop the pass. They've allowed 6 wide receivers over 90 yards the last 6 weeks. And that doesn't include Darren Waller, who literally just did whatever he wanted last week. Like, every time I looked up at that game, Waller was catching a 25-yard pass. They just could not stop Darren Waller. He had 200 yards on 13 catches. DK Metcalf, I mean, he's faced a bunch of stud cornerbacks. Like the last 5 weeks, he's faced like 5 of the 8 best cornerbacks in football, or some stat it was. That ain't happening this week. The Jets are not running out Darrelle Revis this week. There's nobody they're running out there. My Niners are the same ways with cornerbacks. So I'm not just ripping on your Jets. 21 targets the last 2 weeks. He kind of slowed down the targets 2 weeks prior. He had 9 in 2 weeks prior, and then 21 the last 2 weeks. It's clear their offense right now is run the ball, throw the ball at DK Metcalf. It's the other guy. The Tyler Lockett's been a little bit phased out. Metcalf at 8,400, I like a ton this week too. It's hard for me to pick one between Metcalf and Hill, but I think I'm leaning a little bit towards Metcalf just based on the fact of the Jets can't stop anybody.
Lockett's been phased out by getting 9 targets in 3 of the last 4 games. So
right.
Not so bad.
But not doing anything with him though. It's weird how he's like under 70 yards. He's under 70 yards like 5 weeks in a row whenever we get to him. But I don't know. I just think it feels like every time they throw the ball deepest to Metcalf, and there's nobody out that can guard him. Unless the Jets like build their defense this week towards doubling him and like try and take him away and let everybody else beat him, they have no way to even stay with him right now. Nobody does though. Like Darius Slay had no chance. I mean, Patrick Peterson had like all these guys he's faced. Like nobody's stopping him right now. It's just he's just a beast.
I think both of them are good enough to fade Adams.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to save $900 from Adams and use that at running back, like you can upgrade pretty nicely if you do that.
Yeah, if you're using it to like change the defense, I don't think that's worth it. But like that, it's a sizable difference, and those guys could absolutely kill Metcalf can kill the Jets. Hill can kill anybody he wants.
I have them all kind of on the same tier this week, which leads me to probably take the guy that's $800 or $900 cheaper.
Right. No, I think that's reasonable, and we hit on a number. I mean, for tournaments, if you are willing to just go cheap at running back, play all of them. Like there is a path to getting all 3 of these guys. And frankly, in tournaments, you only need 2 cheap running backs. So if you want to play Jonathan Taylor and J.D. McKissick and then Adams, Hill, Metcalf, like it's not crazy. It's not impossible.
Do you think the 3 of them are kind of similar-ish percentage owned? Do you think that one is? Do you think Adams is definitely the highest? Because I think the 3. I think people will start with Adams.
Just go right to Adams.
I think he'll be like a 22% guy, but the other guys will be like 12 to 15% kind of thing.
That seems reasonable.
I haven't looked at.
I'm trying to pull it up myself.
Yeah, I was gonna say I haven't looked at really good ownership percentages yet, but that'd be my kind of ballparkish guess.
Yeah, UF Collective has Adams first, Hill third, and Metcalf 5th. In terms of, I prefer to look at it that way as opposed to just raw.
You're talking overall at the position.
At the position, sorry, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
At the position.
Who's second? I'm curious.
Your boy, Corey Davis.
I was like, DJ Moore's not playing. How can it be my boy?
Your new boy.
Corey Davis is a freaking stud.
And DJ Moore is the reason for the 4th one, who's Robbie Anderson.
Yeah. And the thing now is with Julio's out. Calvin Ridley's going to move up there too, I think.
Probably.
He'll probably be in that top 5-ish. So let's jump down to that range. There's a lot of fun guys in the 7,000s. Keenan Allen's the guy that we played a lot when he was priced down. He got priced up and hasn't done a lot lately. He's under 50 yards 3 last 4 weeks, but still a ton of targets. I found it hard this week to get in my lineup at 7,700. If I play a Herbert stack, then maybe I do it and come back with Ridley and figure out some cheaper running backs in there. But I don't know. Atlanta's just so bad against receivers. They've been a little bit better lately. But 100 yards to Michael Thomas with Taysom Hill playing the last couple of weeks. Every time I look at Allen, I'm like, I should just go get up to Metcalf or Hill. But the matchup's really good.
Yeah, I never fault anyone for playing Keenan Allen. I think there will be some people who look at that recent production and think maybe they can get away with Mike Williams, who's much further down the list, and he's also much further down the target list. So I think, you talked about like Ridley is $200 less than Keenan Allen on DraftKings, and I think a lot of people are going to go there anytime Julio's out. People jump to there. The Minnesota guys aren't cheap. We talked about kind of game stacking them, but you're actually going to get the Tampa Bay receivers cheaper, even though you want to play Brady. Yeah. But it's funny to finally see Jefferson above Thielen.
Yeah, Jefferson's on. Thielen's so good in the red zone. They use the targets, but Justin Jefferson. 25 targets the last 2 weeks. He has 4 touchdowns the last 3 weeks. 70+ yards each of the last 4 weeks. He's so involved right now. And he's just a deep ball guy that the upside is there. But if you're going to give him the upside plus the targets, which build in the floor, it's hard to argue against Jefferson against a team that can stop the run really well. But I tell you what, against the pass, Tyreek went bonkers against them when the last game they played. They had a bye last week, the last game they played. But the week before that, Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp had over 130 yards each. The week before that, DJ Moore again. DJ Moore's all over the place. This dude is so good. 96 yards and a touchdown the week before that. I don't think Minnesota – it's interesting to see what Minnesota does because Dalvin Cook's so good, but I just don't know if he'll be able to run the ball. He's so good that maybe they'll have to stick with it because it's such an elite running back. But I think they're going to get behind. I think Tampa Bay is going to score on the Minnesota defense, and I think Jefferson and Thielen are still really, really live even at the prices.
Totally agree. I think they jump out at me. Like I like AJ Brown. If he's even, is he going to play? So he's not even practicing this week.
I think he's going to play. But yeah, he's a little banged up.
But obviously, the Corey Davis hype is going to make everybody just fade AJ Brown anyway. And like Michael Thomas makes sense, I guess, if you're going to get all of Taysom Hill's targets, but yeah, just like the Minnesota guys just seem like such outliers in this group.
It's funny because if you want a low percentage GPP stud, DeAndre Hopkins is 7,600 and no one is going to own him. I'm not either. I won't. Yeah. There's no way with the way they run the offense. I'm not interested at all. But I tell you what, he's going to be 4% this week.
Yeah. Good point.
The AJ Brown thing is weird. Like AJ Brown's so good, and you see these highlights of him breaking tackles and scoring. They were down 38-3 last week at halftime. He had 4 catches. That seems crazy. Like it's weird. Earlier in the year, we were like, he's the boomer bust guy, and then he got a bunch of targets. And the last, like, that's 6 straight weeks where AJ Brown has 4 or fewer catches, which is, and he scores every week. So like,
yeah,
you can kind of figure it out. But like, he has to score to work. Like he's not catching 8 or 9 balls a week. It's very interesting how they're really. Corey Davis last week was 11 catches or whatever it was, like crazy. But they're back to using him as the kind of that boomer bust big play guy.
Yeah, and Jonnu Smith is back, so like theoretically that's another end zone target that they have that they don't have to use Brown for. So not that he's like Mike Evans back there, but still.
Can I give you one more impossible stat with the AJ Brown Corey Davis game? The Jaguars allowed a 100-yard receiver in 8 straight football games. That's hard to do. Like at some point, you got to face a team that like doesn't have receivers or runs the ball so much it doesn't matter. 8 straight games, someone has a wide receiver 100 yards against them. That's pretty wild.
Yeah,
so,
let's bring it.
Let's jump down. I loved Julio Jones 1,600. He is out officially. He's not playing this week because of the hamstring, so that probably saved me a lot of money because he was probably going to play 4 plays. So I'm thankful for that. Just under 7,000. There's a couple of guys I really like this week. One of them is my favorite play of the week at wide receiver. It's not Allen Robinson. I do like Allen Robinson. He's not my favorite play, but 6,800 against Houston. We talked about how the Houston defense is not good. If it's weirdly like Allen Robinson has become this like floor guy. Like he has 6+ catches the last 5 weeks, but he had the one game with 2 touchdowns, but he's not like having huge games. Great matchup. Even T.Y. Hilton, the ghost of your boy, had 110 yards and touchdown last week. They give us some big games for wide receiver ones. I think Allen Robinson is very much in play this week, and I don't think he's going to be that popular.
This is the one that's your favorite in this group?
No, it's not. I like it.
Okay.
I have $100 less. That's my favorite play so far this week.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I like. Robinson's kind of play that like he's good enough where like always if he's on a GPP winning team, you're like, oh yeah, like he's good, but like I'm not going out of my way to get Mitchell Trubisky's top target.
That's the problem. It's just the quarterback. So. As we jump down, though, I love Terry McLaurin this week. Wow. 6,700. Love Terry McLaurin this week. I love good receivers coming off super quiet games. I imagine he's mentioning that in the wide receiver room all week that he had 2 catches last week for 14 yards. The Niners just can't cover the deep ball on the edge is what it comes down to. Like the Niners are their linebackers are still good enough. They can kind of cover the middle of the field. Their cornerbacks are horrible right now. Richard Sherman can't stick with anybody right now. Like I just think he's not fully healthy. K'Wan Williams is out. He's hurt. He's suspended and on the COVID. I think he's like hit all 3 of the IRs at the same time. Keller Witherspoon is so bad I didn't put him in the game. Jason Verrett's playing pretty well, but I don't think the Niners can stop receivers right now. Cole Beasley, Gabriel Davis, and Stephon Diggs last week were 22 for 290. I looked at that. I'm like, I'm sure I typoed that, and it was 209. It was 290. Like, Cole Beasley had 100 yards in the first half. Like, It's just they can't. And Josh Allen was out of his mind, played awesome. But I get it's with Alex Smith. Devonte Adams and DK Metcalf have 150+ yards against them. Like big receivers, stud receivers have been awesome against the 49ers. Each had over 150 yards in week 8 and 9. Before this, the bad game last week, McLaurin had over 74 yards in 6 straight games. Season low in targets. He had 5+ catches in those 6 games. I just think McLaurin's in a perfect spot this week. I think people may be off him a little bit. I looked at one ownership percentage that had him way down the list. I was really surprised by that. I think 6,700 Terry McLaurin, my favorite wide receiver play of the week.
Wow. I'm looking at the ones we have on RotoWire from UF Collective, and he is far down the list.
I love that. Let's keep him down there. Let's nobody talk about him for the next 3 days.
So is Justin Jefferson, though.
Oh, I don't know if that's
they're together.
Yeah.
He's expensive though.
I still think I didn't think only Niners can stop really good receivers right now, and it has been the case for like 6 straight weeks.
Yeah. I played Terry McLaurin a lot less than I probably should, and I am probably not playing him this week, which is just adding to the list of times I should have played him. But
when you cut the video clip, cut that one right there so I can play it back when he has 9 for 125 and 2 touchdowns.
Right. No,
the game has to work out a little bit well. I like the fact that they are at San Francisco, but they're indoors on the turf in Arizona, so you have no weather or wind issues, which you do have sometime, although not as much in Santa Clara as you did in San Francisco. But the Niners, I think, can score enough that they'll make this game. I think the Washington defense is a good play, too. Just I think they got sacks and Mullins will make mistakes. But I think the Niners will move the ball enough. I mean, last week against Buffalo, they got killed, but they had 6.6 yards per play. Like, the offense actually moved the ball pretty well. They just stall themselves and make stupid mistakes. But I think they're going to do enough. This game will be a little bit more high scoring than people think. I think McLaurin's going to go wild.
Isn't it grass?
Yeah, they wheel it in, but
they do, right?
It's still a fast surface. And
it's just perfect grass.
Kyla Murray looks fast on it, doesn't that?
Yeah.
Well? Yeah, it's actually kind of cool how they wheel it in and out. I've been down there, and it's cool to see. But
very cool.
Yeah, I love him at this price. He's under 7,000. I think for this level of receivers, again, a good matchup is. I just think he's going to go crazy this week.
Okay, I mean, you're obviously very into it, but like I think everybody's playing Robbie Anderson in this range.
I think everybody's playing Robbie Anderson. He's priced way down at 6,200. Sounds like DJ Moore's not going to play. He's on the COVID list. They have not ruled him out, but hard to see him like suddenly jumping in and playing. But yeah, I mean, Anderson was 4 for 94 and a touchdown last week against Minnesota. His targets have been really good the last 4 weeks and should be super active if DJ Moore doesn't play. So Denver's hasn't allowed 100 yards to a receiver since week 9. Do you know who that receiver was in week 9? There's a reason I'm asking you.
Perriman?
That's a good guess. It was Olamide Zaccheaus. Last guy for 100 yards. So. I think the Robbie Anderson love. I think if Mike Evans doesn't play, there's gonna be a lot of Chris Godwin. It's gonna help McLaurin's percentage go down even more. But yeah, I can't argue against Anderson 1,600 all this week. I mean, if Moore doesn't play, it's a really good play.
Yeah, Curtis Samuel is playing. He was activated, so I mean, it feels like it's been a while since I've looked at Robbie Anderson and like wanted to play him, and looking at Godwin, who's so close, it's just like I'm not sure I need to play Teddy Bridgewater's top weapon when I can have Tom Brady's, maybe.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, Samuel playing at 5,200 is interesting in that offense too. If you want to get it, you could just get it a little cheaper if Moore doesn't play. But I liked Godwin even if Evans plays. I think this feels like they're kind of ramping up Godwin a little bit. He has 25 targets the last 3 games. 90 plus yards in 2 of those 3, and just kind of for a guy who was a stud and like second round draft pick in fantasy leagues, he's kind of under the radar right now. 6+ catches 4 games in a row. I think the Minnesota defense is going to struggle. They've allowed 19 touchdowns to wide receivers. That's tied for the league lead. They've been a little bit better lately, but like your point earlier, they've faced the Bears, the Cowboys, the Panthers, and the Jaguars, who, not a lot of receiving acumen right there. The Cowboys have a lot of good receivers, but it was with, a weak quarterback. I just like the Tampa offense this week, and I think Godwin's going to be the piece that I'm going to want from that.
Yeah, I think he'll be the most popular one in this price range.
I do too. Him and Anderson. I think Anderson would probably be right there, right?
Probably, yeah.
Him and Anderson. As we drop down, we've got Corey Davis, who's also going to be popular. They did price him up a little bit, but still 5,700. I went through the stats last week why I liked him so much. He's just so involved right now. I mean, he's played 9 games. 4 of those are over 100 yards. Doesn't have a game all year. He doesn't have either 65 yards or a touchdown. Like, he's just every single week. I think he's double-digit points every single week but one. He was obviously huge last week, 11 for 182. I don't know. I can't argue against Corey Davis, 5,700 right now. He's rolling.
Yep. I mean, we talk about guys who are going to be popular. He's absolutely going to be, I think, the top pay down option this week. I mean, as much as you can pay down at 5,700 on DraftKings.
Yeah, I think I fully agree there, and I mean, he's gonna be really popular. It's just coming off that week, still under 6,000. It's gonna be hard for people not to play him. Right. So it's weird. Like him and AJ Brown have played 8 games together. He's outscored AJ Brown in 5 of those 8. And he's out targeted him in 6 of those 8. Like, he's just been better in the games they play, which is crazy. I mean, AJ Brown is the more talented stud player, but Corey Davis has been better so far in games they both played. It's a wild stat to think of.
Yeah, Davis is finally like turning into the guy that we all thought he was going to be when he was drafted.
Yeah, I mean, he was a really high draft pick, and you're right, he's finally becoming that guy. So one more guy in this range I wanted to ask you about. So if I told you we got a guy at 5,400 whose last 4 games are 6 for 115, 8 for 91 and a touchdown, 7 for 75 and a touchdown, 5 for 95 and a touchdown. He's 5,400. You'd be pretty fired up about that, right?
Yeah, I love Brandon Ayuk.
Well, good luck. See, you're better at that game than I am. You give me someone I always mess with.
No,
Ayuk, that's his last 4 games.
Yeah.
I'm a Niners fan. He missed 2 of those games. I think one was COVID, one was injury. Maybe he went with COVID twice. I forget. But last 4 games have been awesome for a guy at this price range.
Yeah, and that's with like Mullins. Mullins just likes him. I think
he does. They mesh well.
Yeah, we keep talking to like Debo. I feel like is the one that everyone's like, oh, if he's in, then like he's the guy and all this stuff. But like Ayuk's been a beast, and
and I love Debo, but I don't get why he's $1,000 more.
Right, exactly. No, I think Ayuk is like a perfect pivot from Corey Davis.
I do too. I think that in a GPP kind of thing where everybody has Davis, if you can get to Ayuk, and like I said, I think this game's gonna be a little more high scoring than people think. I know it's one of the lower totals. I think it goes over. Washington's a tough matchup, but like Deontay and James Washington had 151 yards and 2 touchdowns last week combined. Amari had a $112 the week before that. So they do get to the quarterback and rush well, but you can get them a little bit on the outside if you're a good receiver. I was surprised. I'm a 49ers fan. I watch other games. I was surprised how good his numbers were the last 4 weeks. I think the 2 missed games in there maybe got me off that streak a little bit, but he's been really good.
It's funny to consider that you'd want to line up with Ayuk and McLaurin and have absolutely zero thought of playing Mullins or Smith.
Zero thought. Yes, we didn't even mention it. Like, there's no way I want any of them. But
right.
I think that there's enough there that, I mean, you look at Ayuk's targets last 3 weeks, 11, 14, and 9. So it's not like he's just hitting a big play and that's it. Like, he's super involved at all points. It's the Niners' year has been an absolute disaster in so many ways, but having Ayuk and Debo as your 2 receivers going forward for the next, however many years is really, really intriguing.
He's really good. Like, the rookie wide receivers this season are just insane, which makes awesome. Like Denzel Mims' constant injury is just a killer.
Yeah, and this week obviously is a family thing, so that's tough too. But he's not playing. But so what about? We got a little bit long here, but what about Kiki Kuti here at receiver? He's 5,000. He was 3,500 last week and came through gigantically well. Obviously, 8 for 141 on 9 targets. Had more action than Brandon Cooks did. Kiki Kuti has 300-yard games in his career. All 3 against the Colts, which is the weirdest stat of all time. Like, I don't know how that's possible, but price is still pretty good. Chicago got lit up by Detroit wide receivers last week to a huge degree. I think they have like 300 yards or something like that to all the Detroit wide receivers combined. Are you back to Kuti at 5,000 this week?
No. I mean, the Chicago defense is one that like I tend not to want to play against, and so it's as simple as that. Like I don't love this game either. Right. Being outside in Chicago in December sounds pretty horrible when I could just play Corey Davis down in Florida.
Yeah, I think that the Ayuk and Davis in there, like kind of in the same-ish range, makes it tough for me on Kuti also off the big game.
Yeah.
Before I jump down to the guys in the 3,000s, is there anybody else in the 4,000s that you like this week? You mentioned Mike Williams earlier. Like, he's become a real boomer bust guy, but if you like that game to get a little squirrely and back and forth, I could see playing him at 4,700, but obviously some risk there. We got T.Y. Hilton and Michael Pittman at 5,000, 5,100. I just think it's hard to figure out who in the Indy offense is going to do well each week, so I'm kind of avoiding them there. But anybody else in like the 4,000s, low 5s you like?
I'm more on the guys underneath, but like I think you could make like if you want to try one of the Denver guys, like going like I don't think there are any cash plays down here. I'll put it that way. Everybody else, just GPP flyers that maybe pay off.
So what about under 4,000? Is there anybody in particular you do like this week?
I mean, I was looking at Perriman, the expectation that the Jets are going to have to throw, and they're throwing against a defense that's been exposed plenty. There's no Mims. I kind of considered Crowder a little bit, but I think he's a little too expensive for being on such a garbage team. So, but yeah, I think Perriman kind of came out a little bit, and then I was looking at Mooney if he was going to play, but I feel like Mooney's the kind of play that like every week I'm going to look and be like, I think I like Mooney this week, and then you look more into it and you're just like, maybe I don't.
I had 5 guys down here. I had 2 of them bolded. Mooney was down here but not bolded. Good matchup against Houston. I could see playing at 3,500. 15 targets last 2 weeks.
Yeah,
hasn't done a lot with them.
No.
And it's Trubisky. You get the Trubisky stuff again. Perriman was one of the bolded ones. If you wanted a piece of the Jets offense, they're going to cheap and they're going to throw all second half against a defense that's has been thrashed by passers most of the year. Mims is out, as you mentioned. Only 1 for 22 last week. Did have 4 targets, but it was 4 for 79 the week before that. Yeah. So I think that at 3,900, I think it's a pretty good way to get the matchup. But there's a guy down here I really, really like this week. At 3,800 is Michael Gallup against Cincinnati. Michael Gallup is a stud, but has been kind of quiet most of the year. You know, they have Cooper, they have CeeDee Lamb, Dalton Schultz in there for a while. Last 2 games with Andy Dalton, though, 19 targets for Gallup, 13 catches. He was 7 for 86 last week on 11 targets. You're going to give me someone down here that's getting targets and is an absolute stud of a player. Like we always down here, you either get like someone that's really good who's not getting a lot of action, or someone who's getting a lot of action who's not really good. Right now, you're getting both with Gallup, and I understand that the way this offense runs, like maybe it's a CeeDee Lamb week or an Amari Cooper week, but at 3,800, I'm willing to take the chance that it's enough of a Michael Gallup week that against a bad defense, with the talent and recent usage, I'm all in on Gallup this week at a really cheap price, and I think he's only cheap because he had the big game on whatever that was, Monday or Tuesday, I forget now. I think it was Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday against the Ravens. But he looked good. Dalton was looking at him. Dalton consistently went to him. I think he has a connection with Dalton. And I just think he's too cheap this week for how talented he is.
Yeah, I think that's a fun one because it just seemed like Dak forgot about him.
Yeah, and it was like he had that one big week, but like every other week
that was it,
Lamb or Cooper, and that was it. Yeah,
right. And even that big week, it was only 6 catches. Like it's not like it was 14. And he's like a deeper threat than Cooper and Lamb are anyway. But
you give me like 7 or 8 targets for Gallup at 3,800, I think he's a slam dunk. I can't guarantee the targets, but like if you told me ahead of time like he had 7 targets, I think he's just such a great play this week. And I think the last 2 weeks, 19 targets with Dalton, I think is a pretty good chance he gets that number.
Yeah, that's a fun one. I like that.
Be in a lot of my lineups this week.
He's low down on the ownership projection list.
I hope that stays the same. Fun. I kind of thought he would jump out a little bit just because of the name, but I'd love him to stay down there. That'd be great.
Yeah. Who else you had down here?
I had Colin Johnson again. He had 14 targets last couple weeks, but against the Jacksonville, like it's hard to figure out who week by week who's going to do anything. Good game script though. High total against Tennessee. 52 and 39 snaps last 2 weeks. He seems like he and Mike Glennon have kind of a connection, which, you know, you mentioned last week that, you know, the guy coming as a backup, maybe he works with those guys more than the starters. And so I think he's interesting at 3,600, but like there's no way I'd play him over Gallup or Perriman.
Do you know who has just as many targets in his last 3 games as Johnson? It was the exact same price. Oh, he's actually $100 more.
Laviska Shenault?
Kendrick Bourne. Sticking with the 49ers. You never like Bourne. Never.
Bourne drives me nuts because he drops so many passes. So as a 49ers fan, it's like frustrating because I just remember like, oh, look, 3rd and 6, 8-yard play to Kendrick Bourne drop. So it's like, but they like him in the red zone. They use him a lot. I just think with Deebo and Ayuk healthy, it's hard for me to get to Bourne.
Ironically, your other boy who drops passes, DeMarcus Robinson, is only $100 more than those two.
No thanks there. And then the other guy was Cam Sims in this game against the 49ers. He's 3,100. I only noted him because he had 9 targets for the Washington football team. I almost messed it up again. 5 for 92. I don't know. I just think there's enough guys down here that I like more. But he's kind of breaking out a little bit. A really nice one-handed catch on the sideline that was impressive. And he kind of looked the part last week against Pittsburgh. But I probably need to see one more week of him to play him in a bunch of lines. But I think he's a 3,100 flyer. If you're like stuck down here, you need a price. I think he's an okay guy.
Sure.
And the Niners can't stop receivers, so there is that.
Yeah. I guess.
Tight end, Kelsey and Waller are easily the highest. 7,400 for Kelsey, 6,800 for Waller off the really big game last week. Are you finding yourself able to get these 2 guys in this week?
I think they're close enough that I'm just like, there's no way I play Waller over Kelsey. Like none.
I agree there. I think if it was 1,600 maybe, but 600, I think I'd have to go to Kelsey.
Yeah, and so just think of all of the cheap wide receivers we were just talking about, and that's who you have to choose from if you want to play Kelsey. It's like that's almost every line of construction requires you to get. You're not going to get a $3,000 or $3,500 or a $3,800 running back that is going to do anything enough for you. Certainly not going to be a quarterback. So if you want Kelsey, you need at least one very cheap wide receiver, and so, but that's just the way you look at it. If you think that. You know,
I mean, it's off. Do you know easy 2v2? You go like someone like Ridley and Perriman, or with Ridley and like Logan Thomas,
Right.
or Kelsey and Perriman, something like that.
Exactly.
Like it's just I usually find myself playing the more expensive wide receiver, but like Kelsey's so good and so consistent right now. Like I would argue less hard than I normally would against the expensive tight end, but he has 8+ catches in 5 straight games. Like that's an insane amount of. That's not targets, that's catches. 100+ yards in 4 of 5. Like he's so better than every other tight end right now. It's just he's the one guy that I could argue it for.
Yeah, I think like I said it before. Like if he was a wide receiver, you would absolutely lock him in at 7,400.
Yep.
And so if you would rather lock him in with Brashad Perriman and not play, I mean there are cheap tight ends that people always play cheap tight ends.
Always, yeah.
But there are plenty of them this week in the kind of low 4,000, high 3,000 range that it's certainly not a double tight end week, but
in kind of the mid rate, I think the double tight end week won the millionaire last week. Or there was a top 5 with Waller and Robert Tonyan. I forget I know it was a top 5 team. I don't know if they won, but it was a top 5 team that had those two guys.
Right. Well, Waller put up a wide receiver score.
He certainly put up a stud wide receiver score for sure. In the mid-range, TJ Hawkinson's playing really well right now. He's 5,000. His 3 best yardage games of the whole season have been the last 3 weeks, 68, 89, and 84 yards. So he's rolling right now pretty well. I think without Kenny Golladay, he's really a big part of that offense. So I could play him at 5,000. Mike Gesicki, who's been kind of quiet for a while, has kind of broken out with Tua. He was 9 for 88 and a touchdown on 11 targets last week. He has 40+ yards in 4 of the last 5 games. At 4,500, I think he's interesting just because of the game script. I think they're going to have to throw a lot against the Chiefs, so I think he works too in that mid-range. I'd play him over your boy Hunter Henry. I'd play him over Evan Ingram. What about cheap tight ends? Who do you like kind of down low this week?
I like Jonnu Smith because anybody who plays Jacksonville, I feel like you have to at least consider. Smith just doesn't get any volume, and not like tight ends get like a ton of volume, although we were just talking about Gesicki getting 11 targets. But like,
yeah.
If you told me Jonnu Smith like hasn't had more than 5 targets all season, I believe you. I mean, he's had 6 in back-to-back games, so like I realize that's not right, but like,
yeah,
it's 6 in back-to-back games, so it's not. I mean, but there's a reason why he's 3,900. I think Tonyan is fine again, like for the amount that the Packers like to throw. Like
it seems like every week there's a play where he has like nobody within 15 yards of him when he catches the pass. Like,
yeah.
I guess everybody goes to Adams and they run deep with MVS across the middle of Lazard, and Tunyan's like, all right, I'm cool here. But definitely seems like he's involved. I mean, the targets aren't huge, but he has 20 targets the last 4 weeks. He's caught 18 of them. Like that's pretty impressive.
He's a touchdown in 3 straight games, so that's there. I think all of these guys are the same, and so like just flip a coin, and it actually doesn't even matter which one you pick.
So you get it a little cheaper, 3,300. I think Logan Thomas, we talked about him a bunch earlier in the year when he's getting targeted, is interesting. He had a big game last week. He had 9 targets against Pittsburgh, 9 for 98. His first game over 4 catches, so we don't want to get carried away here. But he scored the last couple of weeks. Again, I think the Niners, have trouble stopping people, but I like receivers against them more than tight ends. But I think Logan Thomas, if you want to get really cheap. The other guy down here who's kind of interesting at 2,900 is Cole Komet for the Bears against Houston again. He's kind of like part of the offense the last couple of weeks, which he wasn't early. He's played 54 snaps each of the last 2 weeks. Jimmy Graham is old and bad. But Komet had 5 for 37 touchdown last week on 7 targets. He's a guy that has some athleticism, some skill, good matchup. If you're going to get under 3,000, I think he's a decent stab, and you hope maybe he gets 50 yards and scores.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
He was my one guy under 3,000. And if you need to get cheap here, I think he presents a little bit of upside for the price.
Yeah, I would almost guarantee that one of Jacob Hollister or Will Dissly scores. I just don't know which one.
Yeah, good luck trying to figure out Seattle tight ends week to week.
But one of them's definitely scoring.
Yeah, for sure. Let's jump into defenses real quick. I'm going to start with you. There's like 3 defenses I like, kind of each price range. Who are you thinking this week?
I was kind of all over the place, but they've been really just horrific all season. And you know me, I start from bottom up when I go defenses. But the Cowboys against the Bengals at 2,400, like
one of my 3 bolded. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I think that's going to be the popular pay down one, just because the Cincinnati offense is kind of a hot mess, and so mess. Like you said, the Cowboys defense is not good either. But we play defenses that are relying on mistakes, and you just have to hope that the Cincinnati Bengals make the mistakes like they normally do.
Since he's allowed 16 sacks the last 4 games, Brent Allen's thrown 4 picks in his 3 games. Like, you could see a big play coming for that game just by how inept the Cincinnati offense is.
Yeah, for sure.
They're 2,400 on DraftKings, 3,500 on FanDuel. I think they're going to be very popular. I think it'll be popular on FanDuel because it's harder to find cheaper defenses there because they price the other ones up. I mean, the obvious one that sticks out is the Saints this week. I mean, the Philly offensive line is just an utter mess. We talked about it last week with Green Bay. They had 7 more sacks allowed last week. Green Bay didn't do a lot in terms of turnovers and touchdowns, but 7 sacks. They just built such a nice floor. The Saints defense is rolling right now, 12 sacks last week. So I think they're only 3,800 on DraftKings. They're 4,900 on FanDuel. I think the Saints, if anybody's paying up, are going to be pretty darn popular this week too.
Yeah, we've had, I feel like, a number of weeks with over $4,000 defenses on DraftKings. 3,800 is the highest this week. So
I thought the Saints were going to be like 4,500 this week. I thought they were going to be really highly priced.
Yeah, I think they're fine. I kind of like the Titans against Jacksonville at 3,100 just because the Titans have guys on defense who can make plays, particularly with returns, and Jacksonville is terrible. So
they're bad.
There's that, and obviously Seattle at home against the Jets at 3,000 is pretty cheap. Jamal Adams seems like a revenge game there, right? Right, an actual revenge game. I know he played for the Jets. Now, granted, this game's in Seattle, so it's not full revenge, but
Seattle D's coming on a little bit. 14 sacks the last 4 weeks. The Jets have allowed a lot of sacks. The Jets have a lot of turnovers. I could see that. I think that one will be pretty popular too. The other one I like that I thought was going to be popular, and as I went through, I think a lot of people are going to play the Cowboys or Seattle or the Saints, is Washington against the Niners. They had no sacks last week against Pittsburgh, but that's Pittsburgh. Ben doesn't get sacked. They had 4 sacks each of the prior 2 weeks. The Niners have not allowed a lot of sacks, but Nick Mullins, I watch these games. He's really okay when he's a clean pocket. He's fine. He can do what he needs to do. He's horrible under pressure, and I think he's gonna get pressured this week. Washington's gonna get pressure. Mullins is a 4.9 YPA when he faces pressure. He's just really bad. There's a couple plays last week against the Bills where he felt rushed, and all of a sudden he's just throwing the ball, and he doesn't really look where he's a receiver in the area, but he's got 3 guys on him, and it's just I think you're gonna have a couple of bad mistakes. It's just a matter if Washington turns them into interceptions and returns. Right. But I think at 2,800, 3,900 on FanDuel, I think Washington is a really good play if you want to get away from Seattle and be a little different. I think Nick Mullins gives Washington a couple chances to make big plays. You just have to convert them.
Yeah, that's a fun pivot.
I see a lot of people liking the Niners D this week. I saw that on one side I looked at, they were the number 1 projected defense.
Wow. They
were really bad against Buffalo. They were really good the prior 2 weeks against the Saints and the Rams. They played pretty well. They had 5 sacks and 6 turnovers in those games. They owned Jared Goff, but Washington has allowed multiple sacks in every single game all year, which is kind of a crazy stat. I think if I'm going to go in that game, I'm going to go the other side of it, and so I probably won't have much Niners defense.
That's fair.
Yeah. Last one I wanted to mention, Drew Lock has thrown an interception in 11 straight games. I think one of those was Hinton, so I'm a little bit off. But the Broncos have thrown an interception 11 straight games, 9 in the last 4 games. So, Carolina defense scored twice the week before. They were off last week, and they scored twice. The Jeremy Chin back-to-back touchdown plays, which is pretty wild. But I think if you're looking for a big play, Carolina, probably underlooked this week with the other defense we mentioned. Make a little bit of sense with how loose Drew Lock is with the ball.
Yeah, I'd probably play Carolina over Washington.
Okay, that's fair. You don't have as much Nick Mullins fear as I
no.
do. I just every time he gets pressure, I'm oh God, we're
no.
So, kind of a big slate. We went a little bit long there, but it's a 13-game slate. That kind of happens. Anybody else that you feel like we missed or mentioned? I think we've hit everybody that I wanted to talk about at least.
Yeah, no, we're good to go.
Michael Gallup and Terry McLaurin week. I'm telling you,
love it.
I like it. We got to build off the Corey Davis love from last week. Thanks everyone for listening to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, the Friday DFS version. We greatly appreciate that. We want to follow Andrew on Twitter. He's at RotoWire Andrew. I am at Scott Jenstad, Jenstad, Jenstad. You have any questions for us on there as injuries break and stuff happens over the weekend? Definitely let us know on there. Other than that, hope you guys have a great week 14. We'll be on to week 15 with you next Friday. Everybody take care and have a great weekend.